Compared to our preliminary task at the start of the year, our camera skills as a group have improved immensely. In the preliminary task, we did not have many angles to shoot from because of the tight space of the common room, whereas our final film consisted of a wide variety of different shots. Some shots were impossible to film due to the hazardous location and asked us to climb onto several objects to obtain the correct shot. During filming of the final movie, we had issues with the time constraints, which I believe the rest of the class did as well. Since we had a window for filming due to the early sunset of Doha, this meant that we had to get the right shots in a short period of time, meaning several shootings needed to occur. On the first day, we struggled a bit deciding where to put the camera and which angles to use. However, on the second day, we were much quicker in deciding shot angles and camera positioning. This quick on-the-spot thinking really helped us in our coursework, which I think has greatly improved throughout the course. The lighting present in our preliminary task consisted of a natural high-key lighting, due to the lack of curtains or blinds in the common room. We did not really take into account the lighting, for it had no effect on the storyline. However, during the final project, it was quintessential to take intervals or breaks for shooting, so that the lighting could be optimum for our film. Darker scenes and lack of artificial light existed on the set, therefore the area of filming and lighting were considered at every point of shooting. However, camera angles and slight weather changes gave us the ability to manipulate the natural light. On the other hand, the closed environment and the lack of artificial lighting limited our ability to see the difference between light and dark environments that were present at the time. Nonetheless, we continuously changed our camera angles, such as the over-the-shoulder shot of Chris looking back at the Shadow Man, to a tone of suspense. We also benefited from the time of day during our filming. Although we planned out the timing for film with severe organization, as we all knew it was a small window for shooting. Therefore, coming early in the morning was not an option, leaving us with only the afternoon for the perfect shooting, which had the perfect lighting. Digital effects gave us the ability to alter the saturation and general gradient of some shots, which mostly consisted of darkening the shots to further continue the terrifying atmosphere. Sound is definitely a key aspect of our finished project because it was the difference between an average movie and a thrilling adventure. For the preliminary task, we chose generic music that would be fitted with a classic sports film opening for our generation. On the other hand, the final film consisted of a much more complex foundation that could not rely on one consistent piece of music. Our film needed to include several factors that would emphasize our genre. Most of the sound effects were obtained, had a meaning behind them, and are not just filling for an empty void. In order to substantially develop the film's core, it meant that we needed to alternate between music, dialogue, and sound effects to toy with the emotions of the audience. For the final finished product, we resorted to audience effects from the internet in order to get the professional work that we needed to create, but still managed to make it as realistic as we possibly could. Another big part of sound is choosing the soundtrack we were going to use. This was somewhat difficult, although manageable, especially with the problem of finding royalty-free music, which at points meant I had to ask the owner for permission to use in order to avoid copyright issues. After we had finished shooting the preliminary task, we decided as a group to begin editing with the simplest software that we could find, which was iMovie. To accomplish the task of editing, it meant that we had to learn how to edit efficiently in our minuscule time schedule. iMovie is an application that is developed by Apple in which users are given an array of several features that can be somewhat useful in the editing of the film. I believe the entirety of my group had used iMovie once or twice, therefore it was clear that we had loads of experience with the past, preventing us from having to get used to the program. We obtained all the footage from my phone using a Lightning adapter and selected the footage that we could use easy and imported it into the application. After implementing all the shots correctly on the timeline, we began slowly cutting the shots, altering them, and adding preset title sequences. Myself and Harvey found a few good clips of music that would work best for the short film and pasted them into iMovie. We then decreased and increased the sound level of the clip so that no altercations with the volume occurred. We did this based on the clip that was selected. Lower sound levels were used when dialogue was put in place, and higher sound levels to emphasize the action. The preliminary task did not take too long to finalize, whereas the final project took roughly half a year, which I think we definitely did not expect with what seemed to be a simple task at the time. This leads on to the editing process of the final film opening, which is a complete contrast from the way the preliminary task was edited. After we once again gathered the footage from multiple cameras, a DSLR and a GoPro Hero 3, we began importing the clips into two different programs, Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro. I personally had never used Premiere, and therefore it took some getting used to it, but we managed to pull it off in the end. We assigned each member a certain section of the film and then began to explore the more complicated editing software in a similar style. This involved looking at several YouTube videos and online tutorials. It was also similar to the editing software that we used in the preliminary task, and we went through a similar editing process as before. However, new features such as sped up footage, filters, etc. were introduced into the editing process. Once the clips were put together in an organized manner, we began to alter each clip to optimize their efficiency. Harvey then went on to Adobe After Effects in order to create our film logo that would be displayed at the end of the film. Once again, he simply learned how to use the editing software through YouTube tutorials and different websites. He practiced these talents at his own time after school and slowly began to get better at creating visuals.
Compared to the preliminary task, our final movie was definitely at a much larger capacity in terms of organization and development. Our final film required us to research extensively every aspect that could be altered the shooting process. This meant checking updates on the weather condition, construction schedule, and availability between the team. First thing we had to do was create a group chat where we could consult one another on anything that had relation with the film. With this, we decided to film on the 29th of December, in which there seemed to be no problems with the weather. Once the date was decided, we each drove to Harvey's house, which was the closest house to the location of the school. This, however, came with the consultation of parents in order to allow us to go into the abandoned school. However, we did manage to get everyone there in peace and began filming immediately. Next thing we had to do was space out each shot at a specific time to utilize the natural lighting and then use the artificial lighting when nothing was visible. At first, we thought it would be possible to film in an hour, but it seemed that it was not even suitable for 6 shots. Here, we learned that filming takes longer than you think, and we have realized as a group that next year our organization is what needs to be the strongest focus point. We left Harvey's house at around 5 in the afternoon and walked to the school with all of our gear in bags. When we arrived, we needed to go through the school and see every single room, making sure where the restricted areas were to avoid any safety issues, and this took at least 15 minutes, which was unusual. Once all the rooms were cleared, we set up the cameras and applied Chris's makeup. From there onwards, we were limited to time constraints as the sun was going down quite rapidly, and this meant that the first half of our film needed to be shot. At that point, we ran into a couple of problems, and we realized that we would need to come back on a different day to finish the first half. As we came prepared with our costumes ready, cameras checked, and everything set, we had no problems in terms of general organization. However, a main problem that certainly set back our shooting schedule was my injury. Unfortunately, Abdullah slipped and hit one of the dirty windows, ripping open a portion of his hand. This needed immediate attention due to the excessive gush of blood and worry of infection. He attempted to let it heal overnight, but this seemed to cause more pain in his fingers. So he went to a local hospital and stitched the wound up. This meant that for the next week, we needed to act in an extremely professional manner in order to complete the task. It seems, however, that we were not in luck, for during one of our shootings, I slipped and injured my ankle quite badly, permitting me from continuing any more filming due to the lack of mobility. We immediately contacted Chris Lamini and asked him to film with us. This meant that more time was added to the filming process. Overall, the filming was definitely a learning experience. Definitely learned a lot from actually directing a bigger scale production. Not as easy as planned, and should always think that it's going to take longer than planned if any problems arise during the filming.
During the preliminary task, we did not really take into account the concept of mise en scène, and this was mostly because we were limited to the school area and we were given a day or two to complete it. We were, however, given an option of storyline and everything else, thus giving us the ability to generate a simple story that would be simple to film, but allow us to practice all the necessary skills that we needed. The NVC in our preliminary task was prominent. Having Mahmoud celebrate when he scored, or place the glasses on his face, developed his character furthermore. The color of the film was not touched or edited in any way whatsoever. This was because there was really no need to waste time on the color coordination. In our final project, however, we were given the freedom to pick our film's settings, costumes, storyline, and whatever else we wanted. After carefully sketching the outline to our film and how it would function as a horror film for the audience, whether this would bring forth a message or place the audience in an uncomfortable state of mind, we began looking for possible areas which would match our genre's conventions. Having traveled to the school beforehand, Harvey was able to take pictures of the set, thus granting us the ability to lay out our storyboard accordingly. To match our target audience and relate to the audience, we had to set up costumes for our cast. I researched the costumes used in films such as Nightmare on Elm Street, Cabin in the Woods, Scream, and TV shows such as American Horror Story. After obtaining enough concepts and inspiration, I began developing a character profile in order to further go in depth into the psychological mindset of the teens during that time. I researched even more by asking my fellow students several questions in order to fuse a generic character that would intrigue the audience. In the final film, the NVC was one of our main focuses in the mise-en-scène spectrum. An example of NVC in our film included connection between the Shadow Man and Chris, which had to be retaken multiple times to achieve the dramatic effect that we needed.